Salutations. I have been working on the idea for the introductory video. I am as yet still thinking through. One thing I've worried about is how long that introduction should be. I was thinking it should only be 2 or 3 minutes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. You think
you can pick a channel trailer for a channel, and that would be the video for it. And these only get about 3 minutes long maximum.
Okay. Now, are you saying that it will be attached to the beginning of every video?
Every time you get on the channel, you as a not subscriber, you will see this video, and I can pick 2 different videos for someone who has not subscribed and for someone who has subscribed. So for the who has subscribed, there will be the new video, and for the who not subscribed will be the channel trailer.
I see. Okay. Well, I will continue. Whenever I develop something like this by walking around and talking, you don't really write these things down. A speech is not at all the same as the spoken word is very different from the written word. And so if you're going to write something, sit down and write it. If you're going to speak something, go around and speak.
Hello, George.
Hello, how's everybody?
Didn't see you. Okay, there. Okay. And Ivan is there too. Okay. Hey, Ivan.
Let me talk briefly about Lamort Artur. I have made good progress, although the last 4 days have been pretty bad because I've had a million other things taking up my time. But I am well into writing the material for the second act. The story world, from a design point of view, has 3 acts. But from the player's point of view, you know, it never says Act 2 or Act 3. The player, in fact, won't really notice the different acts. It'll be a slow shift. In Act 1, we start off just presenting the background, the situation. Lots of little stories about what it is like living in that world and the kinds of things that Arthur has to deal with. These are fairly low interactivity because you can't interact with people you don't know. So first you had to be introduced to them, and that's what Act 1 does. In Act 2, we shift. It becomes militarily possible for Arthur to begin leading raids against the Saxons. The basic conflict, the physical conflict, is that the Saxons have invaded Britain. They now control the southeast of Britain. They're pushing westward. Arthur is holding the line against them. He won a big battle, the Battle of Mons Badonicus, about 15 years ago, and that stopped them. But they've continued to raid and cause trouble. Well, finally, Arthur has gotten enough strength that he begins in Act 2 to carry out his own raids against the Saxons. And during this time, the decisions that the player must make become more a combination of military tactics, military strategy, and managing the different sub-kings, the people who, what you would call the knights. These are the people who will decide whether Arthur lives or dies in the end. But in Act 2, he's leading them on these raids, and they fight battles, or small, tiny battles. And everybody learns more about the military, and Arthur has to exercise good judgment and deal with his commanders effectively. Each one is different, and they all have to be treated differently. Act 2 finishes with a major battle with the Saxons. Finally, the Saxons put together a big army, and there's a big battle, and Arthur can lose right then and there. If he mismanages the battle, he'll well, actually, no. Worst case, he ends up retreating with a tiny fragment of his army. But then Mordred will immediately revolt. This brings us to Act 3. After the big battle, Mordred revolts against Arthur. And then comes the crucial point. Each of Arthur's lieutenants, each of the knights, Lancelot, Kay, Sagramore, and so forth, each of those must decide whether they're going to go with Mordred or with Arthur. And if they all stay with Arthur, then Arthur will have a huge army and Mordred will have a tiny army, and there will be a big battle and Arthur will win. On the other hand, some people might go to Mordred. And so the final battle depends primarily on how much loyalty all of the sub-kings have for Arthur. And that in turn is based on his performance previously. So that's the basic structure of the story world. And I have not done anything on Act 3 yet. Act 1 is now in very good shape. I still go back and make some changes in it. Act 2 is also in good shape. However, right now I'm having a devil of a problem coming up with good options. See, this is so different from traditional games in that traditional games branch. You make a decision and it takes you to a different state. So, it's a branching tree. That's the way all games work, and the big, bushy, branching trees. But in this story world, there's very little branching. There are a few places where I have some very narrow branching. But for the most part, this is fairly linear, except that you are still making decisions, and those decisions influence the attitudes of the sub-commanders, the sub-kings, the knights. And so you're changing their perception of you even as you're going through a linear story. And so, again, your decisions don't cause branches. They cause changes in attitude. And that is so unconventional an approach that it can be very difficult. I certainly sympathize with you if you just have a lot of questions. How can that possibly work? But my problem for the moment is coming up with options that permit this, that don't cause branching, but at the same time do cause changes in attitudes. For example, Arthur has taken one of his knights out with their armies on a raid, and here they are inside Saxon territory, and the scouts come back and say there's a big Saxon army approaching. You could say, the obvious thing is, do we fight them or do we run? Now, obviously, though, if you make that choice, you're going to have a branch. And we can't do that. So how does Arthur make a decision that doesn't trigger branching, yet at the same time causes a conflict with the knight he's dealing with? On this one, the decisions have to be, or the options, I'm still working at. I've done a few of these and gotten them to work. But again, the decisions Arthur makes involve more stylistic things. Let me think of one that I got working. Here we go. There was one where they ran into some trouble and they'd taken a certain amount of booty. The point of the raids is to capture cattle and slaves and materials and then bring them all home. And at one point they get into some trouble and Arthur has to decide whether to abandon all the loot they've gotten so they can travel faster, or whether to keep it and hope they don't get clobbered. So that's the type of decision. And the trick is the knight will argue for one way. The knight will say, we've got to keep all the cattle and just somehow make do with all of this. Well, Arthur may want to override him. So what do? Go with what the other guy proposes? Or do you go with what you think is the wisest course? Now, the thing is, no matter what you do, there won't be any effect. That is, if you decide to stay with the cattle, you'll still get away. And if you decide to drop the cattle, you'll get away and it won't have any effect back home. So the idea is to make decisions that don't really change the development of the story. Now, there are a few places, as I mentioned, where I do branch, but the branching, it tends to be and come right back again. So again, this sounds really weird, but and it is difficult because all my life I have thought in terms of branching. A decision creates a branch, and now I am violating that. So definitely weird.
But you are changing something, Chris, because you're changing like the context, right? Because if you keep all the stuff and the next scene opened up on like Arthur in a tattered tent, that would be like the commander self-sacrificing. But if he ditched all the stuff, that would be him being poor. So it comes down to you being like a clever writer on the setup for the next thing the player gets.
Actually,
it is changing the context.
If Arthur dumps the stuff, the stuff itself never shows up later in the story. Mm-hmm. So there's simply no consequences to that. The consequences are strictly emotional. If he takes the stuff, again, when they get back, it's as if the stuff doesn't exist. It's just assumed that it's taken care of.
Yeah.
And you can do that in stories. This is another thing about games versus stories. In stories, they leave out an awful lot of detail. A lot of things that are necessarily realistic are just brushed over in stories because they're not important to the drama. The obvious example of this is you have, or I have never seen any movie, seen a lot, but I can't think of any movie I saw where they stop to go to the bathroom. Bang, 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 bang. Oh, wait a minute, guys. I got to go pee.
Pulp Fiction.
So, pardon?
Pulp Fiction. They do it in Pulp Fiction.
That's right. But actually, that's a good example because in that case, they need to separate the characters so that it's just the one guy against the two robbers. And then the other guy comes back. So, yes, they will do that in stories. They come up with all sorts of, God, I saw one the other day that made me mad because it was so heavy-handed, the way they had to separate the characters for a few minutes.
I must think of Heavy Rain, where you have to shower and stuff and pull the controller for every move that you make.
Yeah.
That sounds like the unnecessary things, but they put it in to make the story greater.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story here. The Sims is particularly bad in this regard, in that yes, you do go to the bathroom, and yes, you have to eat or you'll starve. You have to sleep or whatever. Well, many years ago, the very first Sims, they sent me a beta version. They wanted to hear my comments on it. So I sat down and played with it. And in that beta version, there was a family of 3, father, mother, and little girl. But they also had in this, they were experimenting, they had a ghost who would float through the house. Okay, so at one point in the game I was playing, Daddy and Mommy put the little girl into bed and she goes to sleep, and then Daddy and Mommy go to sleep. And then the ghost appears, only he goes to the little girl's room and wakes her up, and she runs out of the room and he starts chasing her. And it's a slow motion chase. It's not like running around, but the little girl goes into a room and she sits there, and a minute later the ghost comes in, so she runs into another room. This goes on for a while, but in The Sims, if you go too long without sleep, you just fall asleep right there. And that happened. The little girl finally went into her parents' room, but she didn't go in to say, Mommy, Daddy, there's a ghost. She just went in because it was one of the rooms. And she's standing there, and then sleep catches up with her, and she just falls down on the floor and goes to sleep. The ghost comes in, and he floats around, rats, I can't get anybody. And so then he drifts off. No more ghost. Okay, now the clock goes, and it's morning. And Mommy wakes up, gets up out of bed, stands up, and she has to brush her teeth. So she steps over the body of her little girl and goes to the bathroom so she can brush her teeth. This is the kind of thing, this is not what I would call people, not things. And so this was definitely a serious mistake. I didn't mention it when I gave them my feedback. I just gave them some very vague feedback. I didn't feel like jumping on it because I knew that particular problem would have been almost impossible to solve in programming terms. So anyway, but again, we think always in terms of branching, and this just gets away from that. And the whole focus is on emotions rather than physical actions. So, there can also be just simple arguments, whatever. So, what do you guys?
My understanding, branches only exist when you have to make a decision between A and B. So you make a yes/no decision, or yes, I help him, or no, I help him not. But I think you can avoid that by making fewer point of no return points. So in your case of I'm helping the knight until he helps me in the big battle in the end, that would be he don't say no if the connection isn't there at this point where he must help me, but I can help him at this point and gain more points for that too.
The issue here is that we're making a dramatic shift from physical change to emotional change. And I've been locked in the games world so long that it is in fact difficult to think in those terms. Keep thinking in terms of physical change. And that's not what drama is about. Indeed, a great many stories aren't at all about physical change. There are an awful lot, well, the classic here, and this is overdone, if you want to go way out to the extreme, is a movie from about 1981 called My Dinner with Andre, in which the entire movie has these two guys sitting, eating dinner and talking. Now, this was not, there were no special effects, no explosions. They didn't even stand up. They just talked the entire movie. And this was not a movie for the general public. It was an art house movie. But in fact, a great many stories are mostly about conversation. An awful lot of what happens in a story. Another good example are all of Jane Austen's novels. There's very little real physical action in those novels. It's mostly interaction between characters, and the interaction is through conversation.
The difference would be that emotional change don't come in branches. It comes in accumulation of things.
Yes.
And so you can still have these physical branches that wouldn't be influenced the emotional accumulations.
Yeah.
So it's not to avoid these branches. So it's to just focus on the emotional. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I think I get it now.
So, but it is strange, and I admit I'm having difficulty adjusting to this. When I think about the options that I give to the player, I keep giving him physical options rather than emotional options. So, but that in fact is the essence of drama. Yeah. But they can be also reactions to emotion. That is, what the other character says, I don't know, this is really dangerous. I'm very scared. And then your response could either be, don't worry, we've got everything under control, or get yourself together, slap, 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 slap. Again, that is a strictly emotional option. And I actually use something like that somewhere in there. So that's the kind of thing I want to emphasize, the emotional interaction between Arthur and the other characters. But again, I keep getting into the physical stuff. Part of it is that one of the design goals of this is to stick close to what little history we know of that period. I mean, in many ways, this is very realistic. I use a lot of the original, well, I'm using the technology of the times. They didn't have plows. They had these wooden things called ards. Their entertainment were these, well, actually traveling bards who told this, the classic legends and stories and so forth. And I have some encounters about that, and all sorts of other little bits and pieces about what life was like there, mixed in with the ongoing dramatic action. Although this does sometimes cause me trouble. For example, I do try to use familiar names and terms when people, when they exist. For example, the character that most people know as Guinevere was, in the earliest versions of the legends, she was Guinevere. And, but I don't call her Guinevere. I call her Guinevere, and Lancelot and Mordred and Percival and Tristram and, Sagramore, all of those. Gawain, I'm using all, and the place where Arthur, this is another good example. The place where Arthur lives is, I call it Camelot. It's actually, I'm basing it very on what we know was a military facility that is at a location now called Cadbury Castle. And I've been there 3 times, to that actual location 3 times. I'm an Arthur freak. And it's called a hill fort. Basically, they have this nice, clean little hill, and they put walls around the top, and then they dig ditches around the slopes, and it's really hard to take out one of those. So anyway, I don't call it Cadbury Castle or any of the Celtic tribal names. I just call it Camelot. But the layout, the houses, everything about what's inside Camelot is straight out of history. Definitely not a castle. Nothing made out of stone. It's all wood. And the roofs are just straw. That was the standard layout then. They had tile roofs 100 years earlier when it was Roman Britain. But when the Saxons came and destroyed a lot, the industry that manufactured the roof tiles disappeared, and so they went back to the old style with hay hanging down for the roofs. So anyway, that's what I'm doing with that.
I have questions about what you're talking about, your design philosophy in your encounter system. So do you mean the sequential, the sequence about your design philosophy is about the every encounters will be appeared in your encounter system or in your story world? Is that exactly what you're talking about? I mean that if you just author the 100 encounters in your story world, so the total encounters will appear when we just play your story. Is that talking about 100? Maybe the 100 encounters will appear in your when I just play the story once.
Yes, well, you do go through the whole sequence of encounters. There are 173, and I've got a lot more to add. But yeah, you start at number 1 and you up all the way up to the end, although there are a few small branches where you might skip some. So why would you play it a second time if you've already experienced it? And the answer is that you might decide to take different options as you learn more about it. I mean, there's an enormous amount of information being dumped on you, and you're not going to absorb it all the first time around. And so the second time you go back and say, okay, I'm going to do it again, but this time I'm going to make some different decisions, because I've learned that Gawain is a real sneaky guy, and this time I'm going to be ready for him. I've said this before, but I want to emphasize this. I expect gamers to hate this for 2 reasons. One, they don't get the branching, which is what they expect. And 2, they can't calculate the fix. That is, in regular games, you want to know, well, how much firepower does this tank actually have? I can't use it unless I know it's how thick its frontal armor is. Gamers want to be able to game it, to calculate what has to be done so that they can win. They see a game more as a puzzle. Now, in this game, though, you don't get that. You do get feedback. That is, the characters react to your decisions in ways that help you understand what's going on. So you're not blind here. It's just that most people will not be sensitive to that feedback. In other words, a character, you might make a decision about something, and the character might say, okay. And you better realize that that means he's not really happy with the decision, but he'll accept it. There's going to be a lot of subtlety in these reactions, and you've got to be able to read them. And most gamers can't do that. So again, I'm aiming for a very different audience here. I believe that this will it'll open up a new audience. Now, initially, that audience is going to be very small, but I expect that as we learn how to do this better, the audience will grow.
But I think it's like Tetris or something, my mom wouldn't know that she would like Tetris, but tried it and liked it. So it would be the same effect with people that are liking the system or can easily adopt to that system and will like it because of that. And these people will maybe with their reaction and their idea or review or no, with their opinion of the game will influence the people that tried it once and get away from the system.
Yep. So, and I'll also point out that because this is the first, story world, interactive storytelling story world, it's going to be really flawed. It's going to feel like this will be like Pong is to all the games we play now. Really simple. And years from now, people will look back at it and say, God, it was so dumb. How could that be entertaining? But, we'll have much better stuff.
Actually, that's a little different to my thinking. Before, I just think that maybe it's like a little like some branching, but we still have some underground system to record the whole relationship network among those characters.
Yeah.
But as you already have said, that's just sequential design philosophies in your encounter system. Just the whole encounters will appear when you experience the story world.
Yeah.
Is that right? But I still think there is probably not the 100% of the encounters will appear, because some encounters will have some effect about the appearance of another on the next encounters. Maybe as you said, we have the prerequisite and the prerequisite about the encounters. Is that right? So some encounters will not appear when you experience your story world at the first time. Is that possible?
Well, initially that was my plan. That is, it would skip through the encounters and give you maybe half of them. And then when you play, it would use a random number system and randomly select them in sequence. And then I decided, no, that's not a good idea. But now I'm going back and thinking, well, maybe I should, to give it a little bit of replayability. So, the algorithm is trivially simple. It's just, let's say 50% algorithm, random number. If it comes up heads, then we show the encounter. Otherwise, we skip it. The problem is there is some intrinsic sequentiality in many, but not all of the encounters. So I may need to declare encounters as randomizable or necessary. I'm not sure. I've been thinking about how to handle that, and I still have my doubts. What do you guys think?
Random encounters can be an upside and a downside. It depends on the player. The randomness could also be seen as, oh, I can't really decide. It's a random generated event. But I think you can also achieve replayability by visuals or by by tiny details that changes, that keeps the play fresh.
No, I don't want to try that, because that tends to have a lot of implications and it expands the database enormously that the system has to rely on. What I'm thinking of is more rather like you're watching a movie and you watch it once and then you watch it a second time and some of the scenes don't show up, and there are some new scenes you haven't seen before. These can't be crucial scenes like, well, will Luke blow up the Death Star? Oh, we're not going to have that this time around. Instead, these are supporting scenes that give you some more background information, help you understand better. That was the initial intention, and I'm still torn about it. Is that replayability that important? Is it better to have, here's another way to put it, is it better to have a 3-hour movie that shows you everything, or would it be good to cut it down to a 2-hour movie and withhold an hour's worth of material, and then if you see it a second time, we'll sprinkle in some of the new material and take out some of the old? What do you think?
How much material is in like the reactions, right, or in the branches? Because that right now is not replayable or is replayable material in the current paradigm, the reactions, right?
Yeah, but those don't really branch. You come to an encounter, tells you, oh, this is happening. What do you want to do about it? A, B, or C? You say, I'll choose B, and it comes back and says, well, this is what the guy did. And then you move to the next encounter.
But if the guy had different like p-values of you, he would do different things.
Yes.
Right in that reaction.
Yes. Another story. I am doing these in layers. That is, I'm not, let's build encounter number 1, and I'm going to build everything for encounter number 1. The text, the options, the waiting on the options, the waiting on the reactions, all of that stuff. Instead, I've gone through and first I write the text for the encounters. I think that's necessary just to, produce the feel of the whole thing. Then I go back and do the options for the encounters. Then I go back and do the reactions. And sometimes I change the sequence, but in general, I'm doing it in a layered approach because I feel like this is Plato's old thing about the difference proceeding from the more knowable to the less knowable. He pointed out the best way to solve a problem is to start with the more knowable parts of the problem and then work to the less knowable parts of the problem. And the setting of the algorithms for reactions and changes in p-values, those are the least knowable. And so I do those last. Although I will point out that for certain types of programming problems in game design, I would tackle the most difficult problem first, because if you can't solve that one, you can't have the game, so you better get it out of the way first. I've done that a few times.
Okay, I think replayability is very important for the type of game to really have the feeling of, okay, this is a whole nother system that I never seen before. I think replayability or replaying the game would be the best effect for people to think in this, that it's a whole nother concept.
Is that a gamer value? Is that priority restricted to gamers? If we talk about an audience composed of mostly women who don't play games, are they going to feel the same way? I don't know, but I do have I want to be very careful about making this a game. This is interactive storytelling, and it's different. The problem is we don't know what it is. It's kind of like, all right, let's build an airplane. Yeah, let's build an airplane. What's an airplane? We really don't know what we're doing. But, that's what makes this fun. If I had wanted it to be easy, I would have stayed in games, kept on making simulation games and so forth. But
do you see this working on mobile? Like reading the encounter on a mobile screen and then having the 4 options or 3 options on it?
Yes, it could work on a mobile because it's all text.
Yeah, it's all text.
And so, sure, it should work on a mobile. I don't want to allow that consideration to influence my design. That is, if we're trying, this is such a difficult problem. I want to reduce the constraints on it. If I'm thinking, oh my God, what will it look like on a mobile? Then I'm being distracted from much more difficult problems. So right now I am thinking solely in terms of desktop machines, nice big screen. I don't know.
And how long will the game be in the end?
I don't know. I am hoping it will be a few hours. And my guess is, just from the text, that, yeah, it is. That just gave me a thought. A note for my work list. This is how
So I want to point out that many players, many gamers or people that play something or watch movies or watch series, they don't watch the whole thing. I know that sounds silly for people that always complete everything, but there are many people that don't complete their games, and that would be the same with this, of course. But for games that I didn't finish because of something that bothers me, and hear from other people that the ending was great, or the changes in a replay in a second session would be mind-blowing or something in this case, that would really get me to play the game in a whole or replay it, for instance. I mean, we must rely on the gamers that really play the game, like it, and maybe try it a second time and then realizing the whole thing and telling others or people that are reviewing the game and get the full breadth of the game.
I wanted to ask you about the icon. You had sent me an email with 3 possible icons.
Yes.
Where increasingly, the snazziest one was the skull, the hand, and the blue circle background. Should I treat that as the final icon? Or
yes, I can send you that too in a high definition. I changed, if somebody saw that, I changed the color of the hand from nearly the same color as the skull to yellow. So A, it would be fit in with the yellow-blue theme, and B, it would be other color from the skull. So the last changes I made is redrawing the whole thing and made the normal colored hand, the white colored hand, to a yellow colored hand, like emoji hand stuff.
Okay. I just sent out the one I have in the chat box.
Okay.
Okay, well, there will be a better one, and I'll just wait until you've got
yes.
that.
I can send it in the group, I think, in the communities in both. So everyone has that logo.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yeah, for the YouTube channel, can somebody give me feedback on the video? I am cutting the second one now.
Let me just ask, I was under the impression that you were just going to put some stuff on the very front and otherwise leave it. But I get the impression from something somebody wrote, you're actually doing a lot of editing on it?
Yes. Did you saw... okay, I didn't saw it. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't have time to look.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. No problem. Okay, so what do you thought I put in the beginning, like an intro or something, or?
I thought you were just putting up sort of a title screen with a little bit of information about giving the context of the meeting. But
okay, so I cut the video from the beginning where you say, okay, for today we are talking about, and then it begins, and I always cut between the persons with their in full screen because they were all on one screen, and I put your name when you're reading on the screen, and
you did a lot of work.
I cut out some M's and you always say, which was the words? There were two words you say that so often, and I always, he said it again, and cut it out. Yes, it's no problem, but yeah.
Yeah, that is a very common linguistic behavior. Every language has its own special words you use to say, in English, it's,
Yes.
although if you want to sound smart, you say, other considerations may apply. And that's another thing you can throw in anywhere, so it makes you sound.
So yeah, I cut about 5 minutes out of the whole thing. That was the all M's and R's and stuff. And when people just like said something and didn't said it right and then repeat it, so these parts would be cut too. And yeah, I blend in the names, but I had really struggled to find out all names because I didn't have the pictures with the names in it, and I must search back and forth with the group to get all names. So it would be awesome to have everyone that will be part of the conversations. I have the names that are on the screen right now, but one or two names I'm still missing. I'm glad that they hadn't said anything in the last conversations, in the last video. So yeah. And I asked if people want to be displayed with their name, and only one said he wanted to be complete out of the conversations and didn't show anything.
I must say, that's a lot of work you did on that.
Okay, the first one is maybe longer in editing because you try to get the feel of how it should be cutted and stuff. But I always decided on, okay, that a blend in from the name would be one, I think 11 seconds. I wrote that down, and so I can make that every time the same. And these decisions take longer in the first time, but when you make it the second and third time, it always gets faster. So I think maximum of 2 hours per video would be with rendering and uploading. So it would be very fast in the end.
I'm writing down here something. Do you think it would be appropriate? There are a lot of videos I'm in on YouTube and on other places. And in fact, here is a podcast that that a fellow just finished a few days ago.
Yes.
Do you think it would be worthwhile for this channel to somehow have references to everything that shows up?
Yeah, of course. I think really the people that search for something really find things on YouTube, and if we have more content, we have more possibilities for people to get on the channel. And
okay.
So with the podcast, if you say, you can ask the podcast hoster if we can upload the whole podcast or just your bit of the conversation or something.
No, the whole podcast is about me.
Okay. So yeah. So you can ask him if we can upload the whole thing and can reference in the description and in the comments that people can watch the whole thing or the podcast.
I think he'll want just a reference to it because apparently this is I think this is how he earns money. So
okay. So yeah, you can ask him if we can take 3 to 5 minutes out of that as a teaser, so to say, and make at the end a short clip or a text that says to watch the whole thing, click on something.
Yeah. Okay.
With the live streams, we will delay that for the others to hear that. We delay that until we have more audience on the channel, and then we can really get into the live stream things. It's really difficult to set up, and Chris did this before, I think. No, okay. So yeah, it's difficult the first time, but we will make that when we have more people on the channel, and
yeah, that'll be the determining factor.
Okay.
Okay, then I'll see you guys later.
Bye.
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 Later.